Roddy McDowall. To the world, he was the eternal boy, the wide-eyed actor whose gentle smile flickered across screens for decades. But what no audience ever knew was that behind the polished facade, McDowall held something far more dangerous than any role he would ever play: an archive. Hidden in his home, away from the blinding lights of premieres and studio cameras, McDowall collected everything. Thousands of photographs, private recordings, rare film reels. He was not just an actor. He became Hollywood's silent historian, capturing the secret lives of its brightest stars. And in that secret lay a truth far more compelling and far more scandalous than anything the public was ever meant to see. The Hollywood of the 1,960 seconds was a machine built on illusions. Studios crafted legends, polished their smiles, controlled their every move. Elizabeth Taylor was not merely a woman, she was a myth, sculpted in diamonds and heartbreak. Montgomery Clift was not just an actor, he was a fragile genius, crushed under the weight of fame and self-destruction. These were lives the world thought it knew. Yet McDowall's hidden archive revealed a different story. A world where power clashed with vulnerability, where beauty masked loneliness, where scandals unfolded in whispered shadows. Imagine it. Elizabeth Taylor laughing in a private garden, her drink trembling in her hand as she confides in McDowall about a love affair tearing her apart. Or Clift, trembling, his eyes hollow, confiding in his friend not as a star, but as a man terrified of what fame had stolen from Chaim. McDowall was not merely a bystander. He was their witness, their confidant, and ultimately, their archivist. The archive was never meant for the world to see. For decades, it remained locked away, a secret collection that only a handful of McDowall's closest companions knew existed. And yet, within those boxes lay the kind of revelations that could rewrite the history of an entire era. Forbidden romances, hidden struggles, political secrets, and the haunting vulnerability of icons we thought were untouchable. This is the story of how one man, a character actor always in the background, became the guardian of Hollywood's most dangerous truths. Roddy McDowall's hidden archive is not simply a collection of photographs and reels. It is the beating heart of 1,960 seconds. Hollywood, captured raw and unfiltered, finally coming to light. Before Roddy McDowall ever became the quiet custodian of Hollywood secrets, he was a boy shaped by exile, fear, and resilience. Born in 1,928 inches, Herne Hill, a modest district of South London, Roddy was raised in a world already trembling under the shadow of war. His father, a merchant seaman, was often away at sea. His mother, a determined Irish woman, carried the household with a strength that would one day mirror her son's own quiet endurance. When the bombs of the Blitz began to fall over London in the early 1,940 seconds, the McDowalls made a decision that would alter the trajectory of Roddy's life forever. The family fled the chaos of wartime Britain and sailed for the United States. For many, it was a desperate escape. For young Roddy, it was the beginning of destiny. Hollywood, in the 1,940 seconds, was still discovering its wartime identity: propaganda films, patriotic epics, tales of courage and survival. Into this storm walked a thin, wide-eyed boy with a soft British accent and an air of sincerity that directors couldn't resist. Within a year of his arrival, Roddy was cast in How Green Was My Valley, 1,941, a film that would go on to win the Academy Award for Best Picture. He was just 13, yet he carried himself with the poise of someone twice his age. What set McDowall apart from other child actors of the era was not just his talent, it was his gaze. He had the eyes of someone who had already seen too much of the world. Someone who understood loss and longing in ways that couldn't be faked. On screen, he projected innocence. Off screen, he carried the quiet scars of displacement. The studio system wasted no time in molding Chaim into its image. He was groomed for roles in sentimental dramas, family films, and the kind of stories that America craved during its darkest hours. Yet, even as he rose in prominence, Roddy remained an outsider, a British boy in a Hollywood that worshipped all American ideals. He was welcomed, but never fully embraced, loved, but always slightly apart. It was this distance, this sense of never truly belonging, that would later make Chaim such an extraordinary observer of others. While his peers were consumed by fame, Roddy was learning, watching, recording. He was the boy on the edge of the frame, the actor who noticed every detail others overlooked. He was already building the instincts of an archivist, long before the archive itself would exist. By the time he transitioned into adulthood, McDowall had avoided the tragic fate of so many child stars burned out, broken, discarded. Instead, he adapted. He moved into supporting roles, character parts, the kind of performances that made films stronger without drawing all the attention to he himself. And in the quiet margins of his career, he found his true calling, preserving the lives around him. For a boy who once fled the destruction of his homeland, perhaps it was inevitable. He had learned early on that history can vanish in an instant, consumed by bombs, by time, by silence. His response was to capture it, to hold it, to save it. What no one yet realized was that Roddy McDowall, the former refugee and child star, would grow into the man who kept Hollywood's most dangerous memories alive. By the late 1950 seconds and early 1960 seconds, Roddy McDowall had carved out something rare in Hollywood: longevity. Child stars usually burned bright and fast, consumed by the machine that created them. But Roddy was different. He had never chased the spotlight with reckless hunger. Instead, he approached fame like a chess player, making careful moves, positioning himself not just as an actor, but as a presence reliable, versatile, and impossible to erase. As the studio system began to crumble, Hollywood was changing. Independent productions, European influences, and new voices were tearing down the old rules. The stars of this new era, Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, Montgomery Clift, Natalie Wood, were not the untouchable demigods of the 1930 seconds and 1940 seconds. They were flawed, complex, some at times broken. And Roddy McDowall was there, standing at the edges, not as a rival but as a friend. He became the confidant everyone seemed to need. He had no agenda, no hunger to overshadow, no ego that threatened. His gentle humor and unthreatening charm made Chaim the perfect listener. Stars who lived under relentless scrutiny could finally exhale in his company. They trusted Chaim with their laughter, their secrets, their tears, and quietly, McDowall documented it all. What made Roddy unique was not simply proximity to greatness, it was access. He could walk through a studio lot and be welcomed into Elizabeth Taylor's trailer, or spend a late evening sharing wine with Natalie Wood, or sit silently with Montgomery Clift in the aftermath of another disastrous night. He was a peer, but more importantly, he was safe. No gossip columnist, no studio spy, just Roddy. And yet, while friendships blossomed, the actor in Chaim was fading into something else. He was no longer just playing roles on screen. He was curating reality off it. With his camera slung around his neck, he captured moments no photographer could ever stage. Elizabeth, mascara smudged, head leaning on Burton's shoulder after an argument. Clift, disheveled, staring blankly into space, as though the room itself was collapsing around Chaim. These were not the glossy portraits of publicity stills. They were raw, unguarded glimpses of humanity, and McDowall preserved them with the instinct of someone who knew history was happening right in front of Chaim. Professionally, McDowall's career entered a new phase. He began to specialize in character roles, the kind that deepened films without drawing attention away from the leads. In Cleopatra 1963, he stood beside Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, playing Octavian with quiet authority. He appeared in Planet of the Apes 1968, hidden behind layers of prosthetics, delivering one of his most haunting performances as the chimpanzee Cornelius. While others fought for top billing, McDowall seemed content with transformation, with disappearing into roles that allowed him to endure. But it was his life off-screen, more than on it, that cemented his legacy within Hollywood's inner sanctum. He hosted dinners at his modest Los Angeles home, gatherings that became legendary among insiders. Writers, directors, actors, everyone came, knowing that here, for one night, they could drop the mask. No reporters, no scandals splashed across the morning papers, just conversation, safety, and Roddy's unwavering loyalty. What no one fully understood, however, was that McDowall was doing more than playing host. He was building an archive. Each dinner, each film set, each whispered confession became another thread in the tapestry he was quietly weaving. He was an actor on paper, but in truth, he was becoming Hollywood's unofficial historian. By the mid-1960s, Roddy McDowall was no longer just the boy from London who had survived the Blitz. He was the quiet man at the heart of Hollywood, trusted by its greatest stars, invisible to the world outside, and already holding the keys to a treasure trove of secrets that could one day shatter the myths of an entire generation. The 1960 seconds were the era of excess, rebellion, and reinvention. Hollywood was no longer bound by the strict moral codes of earlier decades. The studios were losing control, and the stars were seizing their freedom. For the first time, celebrities were allowed to be human in public, to love recklessly, to fight openly, to stumble drunkenly into the headlines. But even in this age of loosened restrictions, there were truths too dangerous to be seen. And Roddy McDowall, camera in hand, was there to capture them all. By now, his home had become more than a gathering place. It was a sanctuary. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, the most scandalous couple of the decade, found comfort there after their volcanic fights. Taylor, with diamonds glittering on her fingers and sorrow in her eyes, would lean into Roddy's kitchen chair as though it were a throne of safety. Burton, fiery and brilliant, would smoke in silence, his temper cooling under the actor's patient gaze. McDowall was their friend, their mediator, and unknown to them, their archivist. His photographs from this period were unlike anything else, not staged, not polished, but alive. Natalie Wood, laughing with mascara running down her cheeks after a night of tears. Jane Fonda staring into the distance, haunted by her political convictions before she dared voice them to the world. Montgomery Clift, his beauty shattered by accidents and addiction, holding a glass in trembling hands while still emanating a tragic kind of grace. McDowall froze these moments not for the public, but for posterity, for an unseen audience who might one day need to understand who these stars truly were. Yet the archive was not only about friendship, it was about power. In a city where careers rose and fell on whispers, Roddy's private collection was dynamite. A single photograph could confirm an affair. A recording could reveal vulnerability that studios fought to bury. But Roddy never exploited what he had. Unlike gossip columnists or paparazzi, his loyalty was absolute. The archive was his vault, and he was its guardian. Still, the question lingered, why? Why would an actor risk so much, gathering secrets that could destroy reputations if ever revealed? Perhaps the answer lies in Roddy's own place in Hollywood. He was always present, yet never the center. Admired, but never idolized. He understood what it felt like to live in the shadows of giants. And maybe, by preserving their truths, he was giving shape to his own legacy, not as the star who commanded the screen, but as the chronicler who refused to let history disappear. Professionally, the 1,960 seconds saw him achieve some of his most enduring roles. Cleopatra made Hayam part of one of the most extravagant productions in cinema history, while Planet of the Apes transformed Hayam into something unforgettable, an actor hidden behind layers of makeup, delivering a performance so human it made audiences forget the costume. But even as the world celebrated his talent, Roddy himself was looking elsewhere. His true masterpiece was not on the screen. It was in boxes, stacked neatly in his home, waiting for the day the world would be ready. At the height of Hollywood's golden chaos, Roddy McDowall had become something extraordinary, an actor whose greatest role was never credited, never paid, never seen. He was the silent witness to an age of glitter and ruin, a man who carried the burden of truth in a city built on lies. Every archive carries a burden. For Roddy McDowall, the burden grew heavier with every photograph developed, every tape carefully labeled, every moment of truth captured in secret. To his friends, he was the loyal confidant, the gentle actor who never betrayed a trust. But to he himself, he was a man holding dynamite, an explosive record of Hollywood's sins that could shatter reputations, marriages, even entire careers if ever unleashed. The 1,960 seconds were not only an age of cinematic brilliance, they were also years of self-destruction. Alcohol, pills, and the pressures of relentless fame pushed stars to their breaking point. Roddy's archive preserved this descent. Behind the images of premieres and magazine covers lay other photographs. Montgomery Clift staggering in his living room, his once flawless face distorted by pain. Judy Garland, her voice faltering, clutching a drink as though it were her lifeline. Natalie Wood, whispering fears about love and betrayal, her eyes clouded with doubts no script could disguise. These were not just portraits, they were confessions, and McDowall kept them all. Whispers began to circulate. Some insiders suspected Roddy of keeping too much, of knowing too much. Hollywood is a city built on secrets, and nothing is more dangerous than someone who holds them all. There were moments when even his closest companions seemed wary, glancing at his ever-present camera with unease. Was he still the trusted friend? Or had he become the silent witness they feared? Yet Roddy never sold a single photograph to tabloids, never leaked a single reel to the press. He resisted the lure of profit, the temptation of power. His loyalty was absolute. But the weight of silence is its own kind of curse. The archive isolated him. He was loved, yes, but always at a distance, invited into every inner circle, but never truly belonging to any of them. The danger was not only social, it was legal. In the 1,970 seconds, long after the golden decade had faded, the FBI raided McDowall's home. They seized reels of films, tapes, and photographs, climbing concerns over piracy and copyright. But many suspected that the raid had another purpose, to uncover what McDowall truly possessed. The government had little interest in protecting studio property. What they feared was the power of knowledge, Roddy's ability to reveal truths about politicians, moguls, and cultural icons. His collection was not just memory, it was leverage. And in that moment, Roddy understood the true cost of what he had built. The archive was not simply a treasure. It was a weapon, one that others might kill to possess, or destroy to keep hidden. In the quiet of his home, after the raid, McDowall reportedly sat for hours among the empty spaces where his reels had been. He had given his life to protecting the lives of others, and now his own legacy was in jeopardy. The smile he offered the world grew thinner, more fragile. He had lived in service of memory, but memory itself had become his prison. For Roddy McDowall, the dark side of Hollywood was not only what he captured, it was the life he lived as its custodian. Loved but mistrusted, honored but feared, he carried the ghosts of an era that no one else dared preserve. And those ghosts never left him. By the 1,980 seconds and 1,990 seconds, Hollywood had transformed. The golden glow of the 1,960 seconds was gone, replaced by blockbuster franchises, corporate studios, and a new breed of celebrity. Yet, Roddy McDowall remained, a survivor who had outlasted many of the friends he once photographed. Elizabeth Taylor's beauty faded into illnesses and scandals. Montgomery Clift had long been gone, Judy Garland's voice silenced forever. And still, in his Los Angeles home, Roddy's archive remained a mausoleum of images, sounds, and ghosts. The FBI raid of the 1,970 seconds had shaken him, but it had not broken him. Much of his collection was returned, and he continued to preserve and catalog with the same diligence, though perhaps with more caution. His friends still came to him, drawn by his warmth and his unwavering discretion. He was no longer the boy actor, or even the character actor in the shadows. He had become Hollywood's memory itself. But memory is a lonely vocation. Roddy never married. He lived quietly, often alone, surrounded by shelves of reels and boxes of photographs. To the public, he was still a familiar face in films and television, his voice distinctive, his manner endearing. Yet his truest work was never seen by audiences. It was hidden away, waiting for a future that might finally understand it. In interviews, he spoke rarely about his collection, but when he did, his words carried a strange melancholy. He described the archive as a responsibility, never a hobby, never a possession. There was something almost sacred in the way he guarded it. For McDowall, these fragments of truth were not simply relics. They were lives, lives he had loved, lives he had watched crumble, lives that deserved to be remembered honestly. By the time illness began to creep into his life in the late 1,990 seconds, Roddy faced his greatest fear, not death, but erasure. He had spent decades ensuring that Hollywood's facade would not erase its reality, that the human beings behind the myths would not vanish into gloss and fiction. He wanted the archive to outlive him, to speak when he no longer could. In October 1998, Roddy McDowall died at the age of 70. The news was met with respectful tributes, but few truly grasped what was lost. He had been a reliable actor, yes, a familiar face across generations, but his greatest role, the guardian of Hollywood's hidden truth, was invisible to most. It was only after his death that the true scale of his archive began to emerge. Thousands of photographs, reels of rare films, candid tapes and recordings. More than just memorabilia, it was the secret heart of Hollywood's most dazzling and destructive era. In death, McDowall had finally released the grip he had held for so long. The archive, once his burden, now became his gift. But with that gift came danger. Who should see these secrets? Who had the right to unveil the private moments of legends long gone? The archive raised questions that still echo. Is history more important than privacy? Is truth worth more than myth? And at what cost should we remember? Roddy McDowall did not live to answer those questions. He left only the evidence, the testimony of his lens and his loyalty. His final years were marked not by scandal, but by the quiet dignity of a man who had given his life to memory, knowing it might consume him, yet believing it was worth the sacrifice. He died as he lived modest, gentle, and in the background. But the shadows he preserved, the truths he carried, ensured that he would never truly disappear. When Roddy McDowall died in 1998, Hollywood lost more than a familiar face. It lost its conscience. For decades, he had stood quietly at the edge of the frame, recording what others ignored, saving what others wished forgotten. His archive was not merely a collection. It was a counter-narrative to the myths Hollywood sold to the world. In the years since, fragments of his hidden archive have surfaced: photographs, reels, whispered stories passed down among collectors and historians. They show us Elizabeth Taylor not as a goddess, but as a woman weary from love's battles. They reveal Montgomery Clift not as a tragic headline, but as a human being whose fragility was as profound as his talent. They preserve Judy Garland not as the eternal Dorothy, but as a mother, a survivor, a soul cracking under the weight of expectation. And yet, even as pieces emerge, the true scale of McDowall's archive remains shrouded in mystery. How much did he keep? How much remains unseen, locked in vaults, or hidden in private collections? Did Roddy intend for the world to see it all? Or did he hope that some secrets would die with him? This is the paradox of McDowall's legacy. On one hand, he gave us truth, raw, unvarnished, human truth. On the other, he left us with a responsibility to decide how much of that truth should ever be shown. Is it justice to reveal what stars once trusted him to keep hidden, or is it betrayal, even in death? These are questions that haunt every photograph, every reel, every tape. What is certain is this: without Roddy McDowall, much of Hollywood's most important history would have been erased. The studio system thrived on illusion, and even in the freer 1,960 seconds, image was everything. McDowall's work ensured that behind the images, the people remained. That history was not just glamour and triumph, but also fragility, chaos, and longing. In a way, Roddy's own life mirrored the archive he created. He was an actor, but never the star. He lived in shadows, but those shadows carried light. He gave his friends loyalty, and in return, they gave him trust. And in that trust, he found his purpose. Not fame, not fortune, but memory. Today, McDowall's legacy is less about the films he made and more about the story he left untold. He is remembered as the historian Hollywood never asked for, but desperately needed. His archive remains both treasure and curse, a reminder that behind every myth lies a human being, and behind every star, a fragile soul. Roddy McDowall's hidden archive is not just about the past, it is about us, about how we choose to remember, about whether we value myth more than truth, image more than humanity. It asks us to look at the stars we worship and see them as they were, imperfect, vulnerable, real. And perhaps that is Roddy's greatest gift. Not the roles he played, not the fame he touched, but the humanity he preserved. A humanity that might otherwise have been lost to TMA, swallowed by Hollywood's glittering lies. As long as those photographs exist, as long as those reels remain, Roddy McDowall's voice endures silent, patient, and unflinching. The boy who fled war, the actor who survived obscurity, the man who carried Hollywood's secrets, he ensured that truth would not vanish. In the end, his archive is more than memory. It is warning, it is confession, it is legacy, and it leaves us with the most haunting question of all. If the myths fall away, if the secrets are revealed, do we still love our legends, or do we finally begin to understand them?